Every piece of media goes through tons of planning, conception, and design. And most of the time we only ever see the finished product, but sometimes we get to see the concepts that were abandoned. On today's video, I'm going to be talking about the concept and unused ideas for Digimon Frontier.
Hey, come on! Call EX.
Hey, what is up everybody, and welcome to a brand new video on something I am super obsessed with, and that is beta and concept ideas for everything, but also Digimon. Nothing excites me more than when I find out about like original ideas that have been stored, cancelled projects, things like the Pokemon Space World demo, which are incredible to me. And there's less of that with Digimon, although I am archiving and getting together a lot of information about lots of concept and beta ideas from Digimon, so I am going to do more videos in this sort of theme, in this concept. But today we're going to talk about what I think is perhaps the juiciest amount of info we've ever had on unused/concept ideas for Digimon, and that is for Digimon Frontier. If you're a Digimon fan by now, you are undoubtedly aware as to the plot of Frontier, but to keep it short, 5 kids from the real world go to the digital world on trains, where they discover that they can spirit evolve into Digimon. It was a franchise first, kids actually becoming Digimon, not bonding through biomerge or anything like that. They just became Digimon. Throughout their journey, they discover their beast powers, they redeem an evil Digi-destined, and eventually go on to combat Lusamon. That's an incredibly brief summary of what happens in that show. Frontier goes places. But suffice to say, that wasn't how Frontier started. We rarely get an insight into what happened in the planning and concept stages of Digimon series. The most information we have is from Konaka's blog on Digimon Tamers, but even that tends to talk about a version of Tamers which was very close to what we ended up getting. Not so with Frontier. Around Frontier's 15th anniversary and its Blu-ray release, we were dumped with a bunch of art and concepts from Digimon Frontier, and most interestingly revealed a completely different setup. Originally, rather than the kids going to the digital world and kind of going on a more typical adventure and becoming Digimon, they instead would merge with Digimon. The concept was a battle stadium where a tamer and a Digimon would biomerge together to fight, and not just at mega level, they would biomerge to do forms very similar to the Spirit and Beast evolutions we saw in the finished product. In this concept art, you can see the original idea for Flamon, and what's really interesting is that this Flamon appears to be fighting a version of Hippogriffamon, although it looks like a Hippogriffamon that is partially merged with a human, just like Flamon. Every time I say Flamon, I want to be like, Flamon! And that is kind of interesting, because although Hippogriffamon didn't appear in the main series of Frontier, it did show up in the Frontier movie, Revival of the Ancient Digimon, although that was actually a disguise from Myrmicusmon. There is something just fascinating to me about this concept of like a battle stadium. It obviously evokes things like Beyblade, the tournaments in Dragon Ball, and even the DS games. The setup for Dawn and Dusk is that you're in these kind of battle tournaments, so I really would like to see the anime do something like this. We've had elements of it even in Savers, with Masaru being a Street Fighter. It almost feels like there's these little elements of this Frontier original idea that have disseminated throughout the brand, but I'd really like to see more of this. The potential is huge. I think you could even do like a tournament of champions and have like Ryo Akiyama come back, have Taichi come back, have at least a movie where this battle stadium setup lets us see a bunch of past tamers. Also, maybe it's just me, but the art in this looks like the Blitzball stadiums from Final Fantasy X, and I'm the Final Fantasy boy. I really like this original concept for Flamon. It definitely feels like more of an evolved fighter, whereas Flamon and Strabimon feel more stripped back. Their kind of intent in their design is they're not really supposed to be who fight. That's why in the final product, Tokoya would spirit evolve straight to Agnimon, because the rookie form was almost stripped of its power, it was lowered down, whereas this version of Flamon feels like it's ready to fight, and in that picture with Hippogriffamon, it's good to go. It really does make me want to see more of the kind of child rookie forms of the spirit evolutions. Like, what would the child forms of Blitzmon, Ferrymon, and Chakumon look like? Chakumon already looks like a rookie, to be fair. And getting on to Chakumon, we have some really interesting concept designs. This first one is almost unrecognizable, and it's crazy that it became Chakumon. In fact, as they were releasing these images, they were a little bit coy as to who it was supposed to be. It's got Garurumon elements there. It even reminds me a little bit of the Lunamon line, but then as time went on and they refined the design, we got this, and it literally looks like the bears from We Bare Bears. But then, of course, eventually it was refined and brought down to a place that was pretty much exactly what his final design would be. I think oftentimes in design process, whether it's Digimon, Pokemon, or any other franchise, usually the beta assets we see or the concept art tends to be pretty close to something we're familiar with. Not the case with Chakumon. Homeboy is very different through lots of stages, and I think that's really fascinating and makes me wonder where the character could have gone, both as a Digimon in its own right in the rest of the franchise, but also as Tommy in Frontier. Before we go to the last few images, I do want to talk about this art for Nemon, which I think is pretty interesting. It's almost exactly the same as his final design, but it's nice to see a kind of character sheet for him with lots of expressions. I like Nemon. I was really happy that Nemon showed up in Adventure 2020. Then there's this Duskmon, which again is pretty much finished, although you can see some differences in color. I guess they were testing different color profiles to see how it would work. And then there are these two pieces of art for Wolfmon. Again, Wolfmon is quite similar to his final design, but you really get an idea of how they tweaked and finalized a lot of these drawings. Looking at this first one, it's a lot less armored and more reminiscent of Strabimon, but it has a lot of the finished designs ideas, the human pupils, the hair, and etc., as well as obviously the scarf. But then we come down to this other draft, which is a lot more armored, features some more familiar things like the cannon on the arm, but does not have the humanoid eyes that we ended up with in the final design. Next up is some cool art of Blitzmon. Again, you can see here how the design went through. He started out very light as opposed to the top heavy design that we ended up with in the final draft. I actually really like this original Blitzmon design. It reminds me of Kamen Riders, especially like Gatak from Kabuto, as well as Kabuto himself, I guess, with the more central horn. And while I like the finished Blitzmon, the big strong boy that JP becomes, I kind of like this stripped down design. But then we get Bulgmon, who had some very different designs. This first one reminds me of Honey Beemon a little bit. This second one is incredible with the big railgun, which is definitely there in the final design, but feels a lot more pronounced in this drawing. And the black, reds, and yellows are really strong. I kind of wish they'd have stuck with that. I know they probably wanted the finished design of Bulgmon to be more reminiscent of Blitzmon, but still, that black, red, and yellow, mwah. And then we have this final piece, which is more recolored and more in line with the finished Bulgmon design, although still doesn't have that kind of tank feel, which the end design has. Overall, I really like these three designs, and I wish that Bandai could bring them back somehow, not as Bulgmon slide evolutions or to do with Blitzmon, just as new armored bug Digimon. I love Wasp Digimon, you may know this about me, I love Fanbeamon and his whole line, so this waspy version of Bulgmon should definitely make a return in official media. There's also a lot of concept art which is basically just finished designs, it just wasn't actually used in official Digimon media, these being for Arbamon, Petaldramon, Mercurymon, Sephirothmon, Ranamon, Calamaramon, Fairymon, and Marsmon. As the uploader Mark FBR, who uploaded all these with the Wills forums, thank you so much Mark, points out Marsmon wasn't actually in Frontier, although it really should have been. Such a cool design, would have fit in really well, but it was in that kind of phase, that generation of Digimon that were released, and he was actually in the D-Scanner toy. Which actually, interesting note, when they were promoting Frontier initially, when Toei was first talking about it, Digimon Frontier was actually going to be called Digimon Scanners, or at least at some point was called Digimon Scanners, so that's another interesting thing to note. We've also got some art from Grottemon and Gigasmon, and then at the end, something really interesting. A entirely unused Digimon. This is an unused Digimon designed for Frontier. It evokes a couple of Digimon for me. Most apparent is obviously Kentorusmon, but there's also some elements of Maildramon that I can see in this hoof armor down the bottom. It's a brony's dream. It's holding like a lance cannon, but it also has a really long revolver. At first I thought it was like a cattle prod, but if you look at his hand, he's very clearly holding a gun. So a unicorn, pegacorn, armored centaur, it's a lot going on with this design. I can see why it might not have fit in fully with Digimon Frontier. Although, wouldn't this make a really cool Armadigivolution, like an Armadigivolution of Hope for a Digimon from 02? Like, give that to Gatomon instead of Oryxmon or something, you know? And then finally, we have this concept for Agnimon, and you can see that it's very much inspired by the concept for Flamemon. A very different armor design to the kind of more traditional armor feel of Agnimon. And in this first one, although it's hard to tell because it's not super detailed, a lot less humanity seemingly poking through. What's really cool to note here is this is so early that its name isn't even Agnimon, it's Ifrimon, which of course comes from the name Ifrit, which is a demon in Islamic mythology, but obviously again, I'm the Final Fantasy boy, I know it very commonly as a summon. one of my favourite Aeons from Final Fantasy X, if you were wondering. And then the design moved on a little bit, and actually I think I prefer this to the finished design. I've never been super attached to Agnimon. I don't hate it by any measure, but it's never been one that I've fully fallen in love with. But this design I really do like. I like that the hair is fully aflame rather than the sort of yellow spiky hair we got in the finished design, and I like the fire poking out from kind of his extremities where there are holes in the armour. I will say I don't really love the sort of baggy hammer pants that he has and prefers the armour that the finished design has, but overall I really like it. There's so much in so little of these Frontier concept images, and it makes me desperately want to see more from other seasons. I have got videos planned and will talk about other concepts we've seen throughout the franchise, although there is a lot less than what we received with Frontier. But it does make the mind race, and that's what I love about when we find out about these discarded or beta ideas. For example, in my video where I talked about the Digimon Force 3, there's a card you can check out here if you want to watch that video. The story of the Force 3 was set 100 years after Digimon Frontier, and the story of the Force 3, this unused Digivice toy, was of 3 different factions at war, which could really again tie into this whole Battle Stadium idea of Frontier, especially with these Digivices being called the Hyper, Fusion and Armor Digivices. Hyper maybe being more like Spirit Evolution, Fusion being like the fusion between human and Digimon idea in the original Frontier concept, and then Armor being armor. I still got nothing for armor, I'm sorry. Obviously armor from 02, you'd think. But yeah, that's the video. I really hoped you enjoyed this look into some of the concept ideas for Digimon Frontier, or I guess Digimon Scanners is what we can call it. Do you like the idea? Obviously Digimon Frontier is very celebrated and enjoyed by the fandom, so I don't think there's many people who would say they would wish that the original version would have happened and not the one we do have, but would you like to see a season based on this concept of Digimon and humans merging together at the rookie stage, fighting in like a tournament of power? I personally think that would be really cool. I am gonna have to save this story for another time, but that is not the only lot of unreleased things related to Digimon Frontier. Next time we talk about Digimon Frontier, I'm gonna be talking about Digimon Legendary Skies, a Chinese manga that was supposed to be a full-on sequel to Digimon Frontier, but was sadly cancelled. But like I say, that's a video for another time. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching, I appreciate it dearly. Thank you all so much once again for 10k. I was hoping to do a 10k stream, but unfortunately the shipments of the Digimon card game have been totally ruined by COVID and Brexit and all sorts of other things. I haven't received my cards yet, and it would be a bit of a boring celebration if there was no cards to open. So as soon as those cards come, I'll be doing a celebration stream. If you're not part of this wonderful family we're building, please do click that subscribe button, like the video, leave us a comment down below telling me your thoughts on all this Frontier concept madness. As always, huge shout outs to my channel members, including my Digi-Destined level channel member Anthony Bontomasi, brand new Tamer level channel member Reese Williams, thank you very much, as well as the rest of the Tamers, Carlos Gonzalez, Crimson Dragon Slayer and Tippy, thank you guys so much. And to all the Khan Club, thank you all for becoming channel members this month. And until next time, I'll see you when we go digital. Bye bye.